Okay, and we are going to start. 5, 4, 3. Yes, yes, people. Welcome to the AfroFinLab, members of the decentralized movement. We are here today with Steven Aldrich, our expert guest, who is also a Cardano community manager. We've got Joshua Conroy as our referee guest. He's not new to the space, but he's new to Cardano. And then we have our usual guests. We've got James, we got Mercy, and we got Josh. So for the sake of confusion, we're going to call Joshua Conroy JC for this episode, and Joshua's going to keep his name. So, Steven, do you want to just give us a quick intro, tell us about yourself, and then tell us what IdeaCatalyst is?
My name's Steve Aldrich. I don't even really know how I got into crypto. It was totally by accident. But I saw Charles's whiteboard, like most all of us, and I was like, that could be interesting. I want to figure out what that is. So I lurked around and watched a bunch of videos and read as much as I could read, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll run a stake pool.
So do you have a technology background?
I do. Yeah. I run a little computer repair business here in St. Augustine, Florida. I was sort of looking toward more fishing and tennis, but this thing has kind of taken over my life. So, but in any case, I thought I might run a stake pool, but then that looked like that was going to just require way more talent than I have. So I stepped off and I said, I'll just wait around. And then Project Catalyst came along and I said, this I can get behind and I can be involved in. And I threw my name in the hat for the Fund 1, 50 people. I was one of them. How that happened, beyond me. I mean, I literally said, I don't have any proposal to offer here. I want to be involved in this experiment toward governance. And apparently that was the right thing to say. So anyway, I've been 40 plus hours a week for the last, how long's it been now, guys? Since we started.
I know,
it's a while.
What was the date of that first meeting? August,
yeah.
It was late August?
Yeah, first. I thought it was the first part of August, but in any case, it's been a while. It's been a wild ride, and enjoying it.
So let me what was it that brought you to blockchain? Was it more the idea of reward, get rich, or was it to do with the governance? And if it was the governance,
it was, to be honest with you. I mean, anybody who's listened to Charles talk about why he's wanted to do Cardano and why he continues to put in the effort and the dollars beyond what he's been paid. That this just makes sense to me. The idea that there's a better way to look at governance, a better way to look at our own responsibility for our own things. And forgive me, I have to pause sometimes because I can get a little the four-letter words just kind of jump in.
Yeah, we have our referee guest here, Joshua, to stop.
Please,
please. Josh, this is your job. If he starts talking nonsense, you jump in, okay? And
smack me. So anyway, I got in, and the concept really for me was not about even necessarily buying any tokens. Because first off, I said, this is crazy. It's too hard. I've got to go to my bank and I've got all these things that I have to do in order to be able to move money to wherever it is that I'm going to, hopefully I can buy at a price that I like. I don't know how people do it that are just in it for speculating. I mean, that's got to be a terrible life.
Badly. They do it badly. That's how.
Yeah.
So just for our viewers, could you just explain what the IdeaCatalyst is? And I mean, this doesn't have to be you answering it. I'm sure other people can answer it. But what is IdeaCatalyst? Why is it necessary for Cardano's growth?
So Catalyst is kind of the first foray into governance of the Voltaire portion of Cardano. And that idea is about driving the decision-making power to the edges. So that a fellow like myself or anybody who happens to own a little bit of a stake in the system can have a say in how the system is run and governed, and what kinds of things the treasury within the system can spend money on. So Catalyst is that first experiment into how are we going to do this, and how are we going to evolve to a state where we're actually decentralized in our governance. Now, decentralization, folks in Africa got a pretty good clue about what decentralization is. Sometimes it runs really well, sometimes not so well. I think a lot of the problem with decentralization, and I'm going to just jump right into that, is that you got, if you say I want it decentralized, you better be ready to step up, because that means you got to learn, you've got to act, you've got to be responsible for what's yours, you got to be responsible for what belongs to your neighbor, and think about what's the best for the entire ecosystem or our entire group of individuals that we're governing. You can't say I want decentralization and then I'm just going to stay at home and watch Netflix.
And what do you find are the typical problems that you're facing, during this whole decentralization experiment? Because I imagine there's probably like a lot of things going amiss, or people not stepping up, for instance, because we're so used to having things done for us, right? With people telling us what to do.
Well, and the ones who are typically the most vocal are the ones who want stuff for themselves. If you watch, the people who are, hammering and they're just in the channels, screaming about this or screaming about that, I always step back a couple steps and ask, what is it that they really want? And typically it comes down to, they want, Wen Moon, because I've got money in here and I'm supposed to have a Lambo. When in reality, you've got money in here to say, I want to take responsibility for me. I want to take care of me. I want to have my own identity that no government or no boss can take from me. I want to have my own ability to transact with people without someone stepping in and saying, oh, no, we don't allow that around here. So that's, if you bought cryptocurrency and you bought it because you thought you were going to get a Lambo or get a big house, good luck. Good luck. I personally would rather see you jump into the stock market or something like that. I think you'd do better.
So as Charles said, if you got rich from crypto just from investing in something, it's luck.
Luck, absolute 100% luck.
So yeah, go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to what Steven said, when we talk about decentralization, I think sometimes we have to look at some of the keywords. And some of the keywords is actually, like governance. How are we as a society or as a community? And in this case, we are being very specific for the Cardano ecosystem. So how do we govern ourselves? Do we just give everything to Charles and then he makes the decisions and then we just follow, or like how do we make sure that we are making good decisions for each and every one of us? Like as Steve has said, some people come in to make money, and that's okay, I think. Some people also come in, like from Josh's perspective, and maybe even from my perspective. Sometimes we look at, okay, what can this do for Africa, right? Everybody has a reason why they come in, but then how do we organize ourselves and govern ourselves? So I think the main thing is, okay, so what kind of ownership are we having, and what kind of governance are we having? So, you know, as a result of that, Voltaire is part of Cardano, as we all know, and Voltaire is, you know, before we get into Voltaire, we're sort of trying with Project Catalyst. So I will just, I see in the chat that there's a question that says that, what are the barriers to good governance that Catalyst is looking to solve? So we talked about governance. So now what are the, why Catalyst? Like, what's, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, before we get into that, can we maybe approach decentralization on a very high level for people? So what is decentralization? Can we just get an introduction on that?
Who wants to jump in?
I'd
Yeah, go
like to
ahead.
hear Josh take that one.
Decentralization, taking powers from a centralized body and pushing it to the edges for everybody to have control of the system. That's the simplest way I can put it for anybody. So, yeah.
The thing that gets that pops in my head when you say that explanation, Joshua, is that, okay, what's incentivizing everyone to work together, right? Because even, you know, Nigeria, for instance, there's so many like different factions, like different ethnicities. Like, yeah, they're united against the government now, as we see from the SARS end protests. But I mean, how come we haven't seen like a decentralized government or anything? You know, like why haven't we been able to incentivize people to work together? And how does IdeaCatalyst do it? Is it just greed? Like, because, you know, we all want the projects to succeed because we want to see the price increase, but also because it has a better good for society, you know what I mean? But how do you balance those two goods, you know? And how is IdeaCatalyst filtering the projects that, you know, may be profitable, but bad for society, or, you know what I mean? Like, how does it work?
Can I just say something?
Mm-hmm.
If we're saying that we're driving power to the edges, why are we looking to Catalyst and saying, how is that helping? So my question to you would be, how have you made your voice known within Project Catalyst? If Catalyst is the gathering place, let's call it, how have you made your voice known about what's important to you? Because that's decentralization. Realistically, if we're saying it drives everything out to the edges, then those edges need to come back and say to the whole, this is what's important to me. And then we're saying that in a democratic fashion, we find that there are groups who say, well, we want to, you know, I don't know, pick a cause. We want to accomplish this cause. And then you rally around that as a group, as opposed to someone up here saying, you're going to do this, and if you don't like it, I'm going to send in the troops. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, if we're saying that we want power for ourselves, we should be looking at Catalyst as a gathering place, not a solution.
Question comes to mind, is it scalable? What makes it scalable, you know?
Well, only time will tell. And whether the current process or systems that are in place are the end all be all, I can tell you right now, it ain't. It needs to evolve. It needs to grow in its capabilities, and it needs to become more localizable. It needs to be where that, no matter, because I mean, we got a guy in there who's Japanese, and he's trying to talk to his people in Japan, and he says, things just don't translate right. Well, so how do we fix this? Because if it won't translate to Japanese, I mean, you got English, Japanese, and maybe what, German for the financial languages on the globe? Chinese, I guess you'd have to say Chinese as well. But how are we dealing with the fact that we can't speak across languages well in a proper fashion?
Because that creates a hegemony in a sense, right?
It does. So that's a problem. How are we going to deal with that within our framework? Forget about Catalyst, forget about idea scale. How are we as a group going to say, you know what, this whole translation thing is a problem? Yeah, or pick the problem. You know, just pick a problem and raise it up. I mean, I spent a lot of time raising my hand and saying in the problem sensing on idea scale, hey, these are issues, folks. And can anybody take a look at this and do you care about it? And our focus hasn't been on that just yet. You know, all of the focus has been on, well, how much money am I going to get?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
well, to add to that, I feel like, you know, the whole Catalyst ecosystem still has like, you know, it still has the Wen Lambo culture in it. So, you know, even though we are, you know, trying to work on governance, you know, everybody still wants something for themselves, how they just want the incentives to they just want to take money and do what they want to do. No one is looking out for, you know, problems that affect the whole system. So I think that's, you know, from what you're saying, I think that's what I'm getting. I'm just realizing how, you know, everybody just wants something for themselves and no one is working to make the whole, you know, complete, basically.
Right.
I might disagree a little bit with that. And I think it goes back to what Steve said earlier on regarding so we've set up Catalyst, right? So, you know, how do we as a collective make it succeed? And I think that for everybody to take a piece of it, okay, so we have DC on, you know, he sort of took a bit of it. He collaborated with Josh and Tash, and then they came out with Liquid, right? I took a piece of that and I thought, oh, wow. So this idea that I'd been incubating for a couple of years or for a few months, I think this is just the right place for us to just slot it in. And, you know, Josh himself and for James, you know, everybody, I think, I mean, we all have, by and large, we all have the best interest, you know, like we want Cardano to succeed. So I think that at this point, I wouldn't generalize to say that, you know, people are in it for themselves. And even if they are in it for themselves, I think that it comes to a point where, you know, most developments that have happened throughout civilization, throughout the world, people do it because they feel capable. They can do it because they know that they can get rewarded for doing that. They feel that their skills and their experiences can count. And, you know, for somebody like Steve, and, you know, to some extent for some of us who have been in Catalyst, you know, Steve said that initially he wanted to run a stake pool. You know, there are benefits to stake pool, but he thought, you know what, I don't have the skill and the time for that. But then this came up and he's like, oh yeah, this is something that I can do. So I think, you know, I think that everybody takes a bit of it. We are not there yet. It's very young. We are making a lot of mistakes, but I think that we you know, everybody, we are seeing decentralization in action, more or less.
So, not trying to get too philosophical with this, right? But like, I remember when Bitcoin and Ethereum came out, and yeah, it was just a money grab. You know what I mean? Once you were part of the core developers, you jumped in as a speculator. You were trying to get rich, right? What makes Cardano succinctly different to all the other projects, I feel, is its long-term view. You know what I mean? It actually wants to stick around and be like, a bedrock for the future economy in a sense, in terms of infrastructure. So it forces it to make decisions and to create incentives for the community to start thinking of the bigger picture. Could that be the case? Like, this is the first time that the good of society is aligned with the profit incentive, like in this IdeaCatalyst thing?
Yeah, I would say even more importantly, Cardano and IOHK have managed to build a system that's actually robust enough to have that longevity and that sustainability that you talk about. Everyone wants to be that. I'm sure the Cosmos guys and the Elastos and the Tezos, I'm sure they all want to have that longevity, that system that lasts forever. They're the programmable blockchain to end them all. But they're not, when you look at the weekly reviews and the code commits and the papers and the research, no one's put together anything that compares to the body of work of IOHK when you take it on a whole. So that its own is a differentiator. I want to just take a quick chance to go back and respond to what I said. Josh is my guy. Josh is our co-founder with Liquid. I thank Josh and Tashoma for everything that we've done to get to this point. I don't want to hijack this conversation, but I disagree with the Project Catalyst thing only because I see so much in Project Catalyst as actually just people who are if ADA is the thing that glues us, and Cardano is like the one community, the ecosystem that bonds us all. I've seen people just come out and help us with Liquid when we didn't even ask for their help. Create whole diagrams, LE5s, things that break down what each of our contract functions are doing, the formulas that underpin our system. Made it so easy to understand. Had a conversation with a guy this morning from Switzerland. Have never even paid this guy, talked to him before, and he wants to come on and help with these things, and he's already producing. Me, for instance, put out this idea in Fund Zero when there was no money at stake. Mercy, you were there, Josh, James, Steve, a bunch of guys were there, right? And ladies, right? We were all there supporting this community, just like a focus group. No money at all at stake, except all of our time and effort and all those things that it took. I put out this idea to fork Gitcoin and create a developer hub, something that would allow developer bounties, developer meets entrepreneur type of contracts, very simple, just really marketplaces for developers and entrepreneurs. Now we see Cardano Foundation coming out with their Cardano portal. We see Ideas and IdeaScale in Fund 2 talking about Cardano developer hubs. Whole conversations have, Charles is on AMAs talking about, we need to fork Gitcoin and set something up. And I'm not saying it all flowed from my idea. It doesn't even matter at the end of the day where it flew from, where it came from. The fact is we're now in Project Catalyst, and not only is something going to happen on the Cardano Foundation, the Emergo, the IOHK side for developer portals, there's also going to be this whole grassroots community-led side thing where we're just going to fund 3 different projects that are all going to try to do something. I'm sure Boone with Ada Makerspace, I'm sure Andre with Cardano Hub, I'm sure they're all going to get a couple ADAs, and they're all going to come up with their best plan to support ABCD, for instance, with Nigerian developers. Perfect example of this. And I think that is the perfect example of why Project Catalyst, it's just a place for ideas to just flourish. That was just something I thought of. It has nothing to do with Liquid or the system I'm now going to implement, but it's something that I know that Cardano needs to push forward and really compete with Ethereum. And forget about Ethereum. I'm talking about the enterprise blockchains where actual money and applications of use are being deployed today. To compete with those systems, we need to have developers and make it that easy for them to onboard in terms of building applications on Cardano. So I do think that Project Catalyst is actually a real zero-sum thing in terms of idea flow, quality, idea and kind of ideating for projects. It's like a breeding ground for that, in my opinion. So sorry to derail us. I just wanted to.
No, that wasn't derailing at all. It's very relevant, man.
I hate to disagree without context. That's all.
So we got some audience questions. First one, what is the focus of today's discussion? I left that out in the intro.
Always a good question.
So we are talking about decentralization and the disadvantages of decentralization. And it's relevant to have our guest Steven on, as he is a community manager for the IdeaCatalyst project, which is a voluntary position. Another question is, damn, I missed it. Okay, so does decentralization, autonomous, self-sovereign governance have the same spirit as anarchy, or is it something different altogether?
Totally different. There's rules, there's protocol rules, right? Think about Catalyst as an example, right? We could say Catalyst is some form of hybrid, centralized, decentralized governance, right? There's still rules around this. There's still voting, clear thresholds you got to meet. You got to have your proposal in place by this. Same thing with staking on Cardano. It's just a decentralized protocol for securing the network, right? So I think anytime you have decentralization, the key to all this blockchain magic is that you predefine the rules of the contract, and then you use the blockchain to just enforce those rules. It's just algorithmic trust enforcement, right? So I don't want to get too technical, and someone can take over for me, but I think it's all predefined rules that everyone agrees to that algorithm. That's just the code. I don't know.
Well, I mean, for anarchy, no one agrees to nothing, and that's the whole point. But for,
Right.
yeah, in this case, everybody agrees to something. So I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm going to go back and agree with Josh from earlier about Catalyst, because there's this narrative we hear often enough within, I think, blockchains in general. And I do think we hear it with Cardano as frequently as anywhere else. Just, hey, I came here to get rich, but then I realized what this place was really about. And I think Catalyst is doing that right now. And we all struggle to define decentralization because we're still in the stage where we just haven't had enough chances to practice with it yet. And I don't think we're even good at naming what its advantages are, right? I mean, the best definition we've shared so far in this conversation is that it's not centralized, right? So, and that's a very powerful thing. It's really cool to not have a single point of failure. And people can get to the point where they can say, now that we're not this fragile, now that we can't fail just by this thing not working, that comes with some benefits. But
with a lot of responsibility.
Exactly. And people have to have that experience of finding out that it's actually harder work than they thought. Oh, damn it. Right, Steve, before we went live, he was saying, he felt like a slacker. This decentralization on training wheels system that's happening with Catalyst right now, I would say a disadvantage of it is that it makes people like Steve feel like they're not doing enough. Who's done more than you, though? Right? Like,
I can name them. I can name them.
More. I mean, you're in a multi-place tie for being at the top of the list, right? Like there's people who have contributed. It's not a competition.
Yeah.
My point is, look, where you've put in as much time as anybody should be expected to put in.
Maybe more.
Yet, right? And yet you have this feeling of being like, dang, am I doing enough though? Right? Because we're all still learning how hard you actually have to work.
Well, if I can jump in, what's really, really difficult is the ability to say I am effectively using the time that I'm investing. So, and that's really hard because it's not something that maybe everybody's done before. Get involved in helping to build an ecosystem or build a way of thinking about how to govern the funding that's going to go out. I mean, it's really, how do I best do this? And what skill sets do I need to bring to the table in order to do this? And do I have them? Or am I just, I'm pretty wordy guy. I can type real pretty. Or do I have some talent?
Is this whole thing worth it in the first place? Right? Then you start.
Well, I have no doubt that it's worth it. It may not bring me a penny. I'm frankly, I actually get a kind of a kick out of the fact that, I haven't made a penny on the ADA that I bought. I'm just about smack even. So, I get a kick out of that because it just tells me that, hey, this thing's pretty dang stable. I've watched it go up, I watched it go down, I watched it do it. But you know what? Over time, it's pretty dang stable. I'm okay with that. So anyway, I jumped in and stepped on you. Sorry.
I So I think that when we look at decentralization, right, in terms of what DC said, like contracts on the blockchain, that's really, really easy, right? Because we just write a smart contract and then we can say that, okay, Teshoma is in charge of this and Josh is in charge of this. And if you don't do it, then you don't sort of get paid, right? But then there's the second level, which is there are some things that we cannot write a smart contract for. There are some things that we cannot put on the blockchain. So I think that is where the problem comes in. Should I say, no, maybe I should say that's where the challenges come in, because then who is doing what and who is picking up the slack, or who is setting the rules? Because there has to be rules at some point.
So I want to bring Josh into this conversation here. Backstory. So I actually met Josh at coding camp like 4 years ago, etc. And I remember like being super excited about blockchain, but you were still kind of on the edges, right? Like, how do you feel about decentralization now? And like based on this conversation or up until this conversation, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think my outlook has completely changed. So back then, I was actually just coming off of a corporate job where I was actually looking for centralized solutions, digital centralized solutions. So I was in a completely different headspace. But now through actually looking through the space and seeing where it's going, it's almost like a lot of the corporate banks are doing a U-turn and looking around at what's going on in these areas now. So yeah, I'm very excited to be on this side of the table now.
But what makes you feel like decentralization is going to work? You know what I mean? Like,
I never said
have we seen any work. Okay. Because have we seen any examples or parallels in history, like of decentralized and working at scale? And
are you asking me specifically, or?
No, I'm asking that to the group, just pushing the conversation along.
I've been reading about the French Revolution lately, and it's been really helpful, and how many different waves it had and how the nature of the whole thing changed every year or two. And every time it only takes a few pages to be like, holy crap, like this is what we're doing right now. And there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? And I think just specifically naming a disadvantage of decentralization is, sure, we have algorithmic trust now, but a lot of people are still not predisposed to trust each other, especially when somebody starts taking on a leadership role, right? It doesn't matter where your heart is. It matters that you are doing anything in a leadership capacity that raises the question of, hey, why this person? Why should we trust this person to take action on everyone's behalf? And I think we're going to see I think we're going to see some really interesting patterns emerge over the next few months of people kind of stepping in to try to play a role. I think there's a lot of things that can be disorienting or discouraging when you try to take on that kind of work. I don't know if anybody else has had that kind of experience.
I think we have to, sorry, did you want to say something, Josh?
Do you mean, James, in terms of people looking at work that needs to be done, seeing that there's a leader involved in it and sort of changing how they operate because there's a leader?
I think one thing we have to all come to consensus on is what's the relationship between decentralization and leadership, right? Like, does decentralization just mean there's never ever a leader? Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever in charge? Because if that's who's
in charge of the internet? That's my rebuttal to all of this talk about decentralization. Do we have past? Okay, we have this thing called the internet now, and anyone has access to information now. We didn't have that before. We had libraries and centralized, players and gatekeepers of information. So now we have this thing called internet, and we have this thing called data, which is bandwidth for information. So
people still make decisions about the protocol, though.
Who does? Who? Is it decentralized or is it one leader? That's what I'm asking.
It's more that it's people, though.
Ah, right. It's people. And we're okay with that, right? Because it's good enough. It's still distributed and decentralized. So if we can have the same thing for our data and our money, right, and our identities, that is what decentralization gives you. It's whatever you build on top of that, sure. that's all application layer, layer 3, 4, that's fine.
So
But we're talking about the general ethos, right?
So our guest, Izuchukwu, added another layer to this conversation. They say adding leadership into decentralization makes it centralized, but that's my opinion. And also, I want to build on James's point as well. It's like, if you have a decentralized system and someone steps up to play the role of leader, is it the case of like everyone just kind of like sits back and waits for orders from this leader? And if not, then how does that change in leadership happen smoothly? Like, how does someone know, okay, it's time for me to step back and let someone else come in?
Liquid democracy, right?
Mm.
So if we introduce things like liquid democracy, then it's easy.
Explain what liquid democracy is.
DC, you need to help me because I don't know how to use like technical terms to do that.
Don't use technical terms. Don't use them.
Good call, Steven. I would say from like an LE5, liquid democracy is the concept that you can have very quick voting rounds for kind of low-level decisions that anyone can like vote with and have a decision implemented quickly. So I'll give an example. I live in Philadelphia, and right now we have protests going on. There's some businesses that are shut down and bordered, some that are open. Liquid democracy at like a government, like a literally just a basic public government layer would be saying, do we want to implement a curfew of 10 p.m. for the next 10 days in Philadelphia? Everyone who has a Philadelphia residence zip code can just log in with their Altala Prism, vote on this simple app, like a Project Catalyst voting app, yes, no. And then over 50% yes, over 50% nay, that's the decision. That would be an example of like liquid democracy in action.
Okay, but I see something there. Like, I feel like the game changes when money's involved. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like, if the benefit benefits like 51% of the people, like, like financially, how do you fix that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, liquid democracy has pros and cons. The pros, obviously, you get quick, the people are deciding with their feet very quickly, which is kind of what the ultimate goal of democracy is, right? The cons are the people, like if you trust just wisdom of the crowds, that's what Project Catalyst is all about, right? Giving the vote to the people, then you're going to see wisdom of the crowds for the better and the worse, right? So in times, wisdom of the crowds and mania, it's not probably the best. So that's when you talk about, okay, what does introducing maybe not a leader, but maybe like a board of governors, kind of like what Switzerland does, right? Like there's no president, there's like this elected group of folks who amongst themselves, I think it's like equals amongst or something like that. And it's like, okay, this is the concept that we don't need a single leader. We just need a governing body that collectively we can come to good decisions when we need to, that are higher level than just liquid democracy. It's almost like there's layers to voting, right? You do want liquid, but you also want some like, okay, we're gonna have like a higher level governing body that's maybe, just more expertise in certain areas that when we need them, when the stakes are really high, we can count on this governing group to make the right call, even independent of what the liquid, quick vote of the people want. So that's how I think about it.
Something sounds weird here to me about the way you're talking about liquid. I mean, I thought that the whole point behind it being liquid was that you did have your governing body or whatever, but and they do the voting. But if I raise my hand and I say, hey, I really want to vote on this one personally, I want my vote heard, I want it counted as mine, that I can pull back and say, here's my direct vote. So that's the difference between you've got a governing body and then having direct democracy where everyone votes on every single thing. And I thought that liquid was kind of a combining of the capability to have the governing body.
Yeah, you're right.
You could reach. Am I?
You're right. So I kind of glossed over the fact that in liquid democracy, there's this concept of delegation, right? So you have that governing body, and if say that like when I gave up this example where they have expertise in a topic that it's not just like shutting down curfew, it's something I have no topic in. I don't understand how water billing works, for instance.
Right.
I would delegate my vote to these people because they're experts in that topic and they can make the best informed decision with my voting power. If it's a topic that I feel strongly about, I'm informed on, and I want to vote on, like Steve said, I can actually then go and vote myself. So it's an either or type. You can delegate to that governing body, or you can vote with your feet yourself. So that's kind of the concept of liquid. Yeah, good call, Steve. Thanks for correcting me.
Well, DC, it seems like you went over our attendee. They say liquid democracy should be implemented in countries with dictators.
See, that's the thing though. Like Cardano makes using like liquid democracy and just voting in general, because there's many different types of voting systems. You don't have to use ADA to do that, right? Like we have Jormungandr, we have like a sidechain that we're going to even use for Project Catalyst voting. Anyone can repurpose that with Atala Prism, implement Atala Prism in their country, and now you just have a liquid democracy voting system out of the box, just like that. Like, yeah, someone has to pay for the transaction on the blockchain on the back end, but that's really cheap in Cardano. So this is like things that we can implement very quickly.
So, like, I mean, just for our viewers, right? Because it sounds like we're talking about science fiction right now. I mean, how long until we start seeing liquid democracy actually implemented? You know, is IdeaCatalyst anywhere near that stage currently? And if so, what's the roadmap towards it? What's the problems we're having now?
Steve, you should talk more on this, and James as well. But I think we're a few iterations of Project Catalyst away from a true liquid democracy system where you have advisors who are getting votes delegated to them. I think we're far away.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're, you know, and there's a whole topic, a whole discussion group within the Discord server where we're talking about, you know, this concept of experts ballots or expert voting ballots, where someone would come in and say, hey, here's how I would vote this particular round of Catalyst or this ballot of proposals. And people would have the opportunity to adopt that voting strategy. I don't know how long that's
even that in itself is dicey.
Okay.
It can be, it certainly can be. And it depends on how you approach it and what the understandings are of the people. You know, the concept is a beautiful concept to try and lighten the burden on the individuals, because frankly, people would rather watch Netflix than do the work. And I don't mean to make that kind of a generalization about everybody, but it's, I mean, hey, I'd rather watch Netflix.
People love
hey,
to
me, Steve would.
Right.
So, but will I do the work? Absolutely. Do I do as much as I could? Probably not. So, and I'm really, really, really embedded here.
There's so many threads. It's so exciting. No, there's just too many things to unpack, but right. And we don't want to be like, we don't want to point our finger at people and just say, oh, people are like this, people are like that. But the simple fact is there are people out there who would both rather watch Netflix and then also point their finger at you and say, who are you to make an expert ballot, right? And we have to meet those people where they're at somehow, right? And so I agree with DC completely. We just need a few funding rounds to happen. There's certain problems that we're just not going to make any progress on until we have funds 2, 3, and 4 in the books, right? We just have to be able to point to people and say, look, hey, it works, right? Just get your initial questions off the table and start showing that, hey, there are people who have paid enough attention to have a little bit of expertise so that they can contribute in that way. Because I think I understand the system well enough to kind of be all for expert ballots on a high level, right? But it's just that I see too many things that could go wrong with them in terms of who's going to trust those and what's the blowback going to be to people who put in the time to put together an expert ballot. And is it even worth it to put yourself out there and call yourself an expert in that way?
I mean, look at the case with COVID currently, you know, it's like in terms of people being suspicious of the experts, etc., but it's still just being enforced anyway.
That's right.
So I think this is, you know, when we talk about, you know, why don't I rather watch Netflix? You know, why would I want to put myself out there to be an expert? Because definitely there will be, you know, like if there are 50 projects and someone decides that, okay, I'm the expert and choose only 20 projects, definitely there will be blowback. But I think that this is the place where we have to talk about incentives, right? Because I feel that if somebody is, back to what Steve was saying, that, like how many projects am I going to be reviewing? And, how do I pick some other people's slack? And I know that, it's not everybody who is motivated by incentives, right? But I think that by and large, it really comes down to, our hardworking people being incentivized appropriately. And I think that those are some of the discussions that we need to have in order to, move this decentralization discussion a bit forward. And then I'll just piggyback a little bit on the leadership in terms of, okay, so when we talk about leadership in decentralization, doesn't that centralize it? In a way it might, and I'm going to get a little bit theoretical here, because I think that, when we look at any group of people, any community that comes together, everybody has their skills. James is a good educator, other people, everybody has their skills. So when it comes to, say, as a group, and then there's something about education that we need to talk about, or decisions that we need to make about education, then in that case, we all defer to James, because, like he's the educator. I mean, when we talk about this broadcast that we are having, Teshoma is the one that edits it. So whatever he says, I don't have the skills. So in a way, he's the leader when it comes to this, right? And if there's something about community advisors, in Catalyst, and somebody says something regarding community advising, I would rather defer to the people who've been doing the community advice thing, somebody like Steve or whatever. And I think that is how a good decentralized community works. We recognize each other's skills. We recognize people's abilities. We incentivize people appropriately for their skills and the amount of work that they would put in. And hopefully that's where we'll get to one of these days.
So one thing that comes up is, how do we value people's skills? How do we come to consensus of how much value someone's inputting into the system? And another thing, like, does AI get involved at this point? Like, at some point, like, do we start like loading off that decision making to like some cloud computing AI? I don't know, just to help make things a bit more like navigable on the system, because there's going to be so many decisions to make, right? So it's an information problem also. What's your thoughts on that, guys?
I think too early for AI. We need way more data. I think that in the future, 100%, AI, machine learning, all these things, right? Let it take over. But you need really large amount of data sets for everything that you want to build AI to optimize around. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I think for now, we already have really good algorithms. Like Ouroboros itself as a coordinating algorithm for Cardano is amazing. Like what that does for ADA as a risk-free asset is like all you need to build an entire community around Cardano. I think that we need way more voting. I think liquid democracy, and Josh talks about this, Steven talks about this, James has some conversations around these things. We got to implement that even at the Project Catalyst level. Think about if we were voting on how long the funding rounds should be, how large they should be, what percentage we should allocate to each sector, podcasts, dApps, education. Like, give those things to the community. We're ready to take on that role. We've proven, that we can handle that. I think that is how you get us to the next level. Cardano as a base layer infrastructure is very great. It's solid, but you got to get the community empowered enough to take over. And I think the only way you do that is just let us vote with our feet. Let us do things, let us break things, and then we'll learn the right way, just like Ethereum, right? No different, right? So that's my 2 cents on it.
You used an interesting word there. You said, give that power to us. Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to anyone in this community who actually holds voting power, which is anyone who holds ADA. A single.
There
ADA.
you go. Okay, so we're just going to do.
Yeah,
I think is what I hear you saying.
100%.
There you go. Okay, that's
We're already
So-
doing
so
it,
DC
I think.
because we got nobody to say, hey, come on, can we
You're talking to the mirror.
please, Papa, let us have this.
Well, right now we do actually. That's the thing. That's Door and IOHK. I mean, I love them. They're great. Would rather, have IOHK as my papa right now, as you say it, Steven.
Forgive me.
Then some of
That's a
these other
terrible way to
foundations.
say it. I'm sorry.
You know what I mean? I kind of, Project Catalyst, we're still kind of semi-centralized, right? And I want it to be at the place where we can say without a doubt, we're putting aside 10% of this fund to Africa develop projects, whether it's
Right?
ABCD, AfroFinLab, West Africa Alliance on Merseyside. This is the stage of, maturity we got to get to, and it's going to take some rounds. But I think that having quick voting rounds for the people, and by the people, anyone who holds ADA, right, that's going to allow us to get there quicker than just saying, okay, IOHK says it's 6 weeks rounds and it's $250,000. Like that, to me, that's just not.
Absolutely. And I think that that's been the intent all along. I mean, if you listen to what's been said, that was the intent, but I mean, we haven't even had a voting round yet.
100%.
I mean, a real voting rounds. We get a couple rounds under our belts, where they do have, as you said, the data to actually look at how's this going and are we, can we roll this out in bigger and faster ways? I mean, even, I've heard Charles and Doors actually said it before too, that, they're anticipating more of an interleaving kind of a, where fund, 4 is going and it's not quite ready to vote yet. And now fund 5 is starting right along with it. And then, and we're actually going to have where we've got many of them running, not concurrently, or not consecutively, but concurrently as they roll out. I think we're gonna see 1 month, 4-week cycles where things are starting at 4 weeks, and we're gonna see much larger funds. So
I agree.
but we got to see that we got to see that people are willing to do the work.
100%.
And
It's all about
patience,
that.
right? We have to cultivate patience somehow. No matter, it's a miracle to watch. Is D going to hit 0.5 today, a couple hours from now, right? But it hasn't.
so.
It
What's
hasn't
D?
happened.
Could you explain D, please, James?
Yeah, it's the proportion of staking pools that are operated by the community. Okay, so when it's 0.5, that means as of 2 hours from now or 3 hours from now or whatever, half of all blocks minted on the Cardano blockchain will be minted by owner-operated stake pools instead of the centralized
Federated.
stake pools.
But let me ask you something. Does that actually affect the weight of votes, though? And is this just a whale-centric
Oh no,
voting
I'm just
system?
using that as an example, right? No, but it's a matter of no matter how moving towards decentralization has to be a process. You can't just throw the whole thing out there all at once and then clean up the mess later. Right? But no matter how fast you make it available, it's not fast enough for some people, right? And so we just have to kind of patiently keep showing, hey, here's how decentralized we are so far. Here's the next step. Here's how you can get involved, and maybe we bring it back to the Netflix thing. Don't tell people to turn off all their Netflix at once, but just watch 10% less, right? Spend a little bit of that time reading some Catalyst proposals or whatever, wherever you can apply your skills and your talents. We have to make sure to kind of provide, the steps for people to get there.
Like, you still have to own ADA to vote, right? I mean, that's the thing. So there's a barrier to entry in regards to having influence. Like, if you ain't got the P, you ain't got no say. Money talks, right?
We don't.
How do we fix this?
Yeah. Good.
Why would you care to vote?
Great question.
What would you be voting for?
So to answer both of your questions, Shoma and Steven, I think it's all incentives and not really disincentives in this case, mainly just incentives. Like, you have to find a way to bring an expert voting class or maybe expert marketers into Cardano, even if they don't hold ADA, even if they have no idea what cryptocurrency is, you got to find a way to give these people some ability to vote and to interact with the ecosystem, or else we're never going to grow outside of our, Cardano loving. It's a large ecosystem, no doubt. It's global already, But to expand this thing to, take on actual mass adoption, I think you have to find a way to incentivize people who do not hold ADA to want to vote and to actually work in Project Catalyst. And they have some concepts around this. Charles talks about this and trying to formalize the process behind bringing in accounting and consulting firms to really work with some of these, projects to really scale them up over time, especially as, like Steve says, you got multi-million-dollar concurrent running funding rounds. You really need some structure at that time. But even more importantly than that, and I'm a consultant by day, so I understand how these things work and why you actually do need to add that structure. You still need to bring in marketing people, web design folks, folks who can do diagrams and LE5s for days, right? Folks who can be expert voters, from a philosophical standpoint. I think that those people need to be incentivized to earn ADA, to get Cardano, right? So financially incentivize them, even if they've never heard of cryptocurrency before. So how do you do that? I'm not the genius that knows that answer, but I think that's what you actually have to do in order to get other folks in.
How do you feel about that point, Steven?
All right, what did you say?
And I was just asking Steven how he feels about that point, about whether people who don't hold ADA, whether they should be incentivized to vote also.
Well, I just don't know. I just don't know what they would vote on and what their reasoning for doing that would be. But I got to be honest with you. Anytime the concept of incentivizing action comes up, I want to get paid. I would love to get paid, man. I like spending money. I like having stacks of $100 bills. But the truth of the matter is, anytime you bring that subject up, people show up just for the cheddar.
Sure.
And I got to be honest with you, it spooks me out.
Sure. So go ahead, Mercy.
Okay, so I'm just going to add something very short to what you said, DC, then maybe you can pick it up from there. So I agree with you half, like 50%. In terms of, I absolutely agree that we have to bring skilled people into our Cardano ecosystem, especially in implementation. So say with my project, we don't have all the skills that we need in our team. So absolutely, if I know somebody who is really good, say in project management, I think it's good for for us to bring them in and to pay them, like incentivize them for their time. When it comes to actual voting, I think that it becomes a bit like, like being a citizen of a country, right? You cannot vote unless you are, by birth or by adoption or, whatever it takes. So I think that when it comes to voting, it has to be exclusive to only people who actually hold ADA, who has, like they have skin in the game, more or less. That's what I think.
So, okay, so this is the problem, right? And this is the heart of it. I'm glad we're talking about this. What skin in the game really means right now to people is just holding ADA. What skin in the game means to me actually is very different. It means working for the ecosystem. So providing skills as someone who can provide diagrams and content writing, someone who can actually develop applications, someone who can run a stake pool, but may not have a lot of stake delegate. All of these different things to me counts as skin in the game in Cardano. I know plenty of people who have money who own ADA or don't own ADA or the cryptocurrency. To me, that is just like the most basic level of skin in the game. I'm saying, why can't we use Project Catalyst to introduce a true skin in the game process where you actually labor for the blockchain and then you get the ability to vote and actually earn ADA. So it's a different concept of saying, okay, it's exclusive, like staking is exclusive. You got to own ADA in order to stake, right? That's okay. But when you talk about scaling up a grassroots-led decentralized protocol, I think you got to have people, who are willing to work for the protocol, even if they don't own any tokens. And then over time, they know that they're being incentivized to work harder and harder to earn more. I think like Steve said, it can definitely be gamed. Everything can. You gotta make sure that your game theory is tight. You gotta make sure that your protocol incentives and disincentives and slashing are really tight when you introduce these things. But I do think about this, for example, if you can introduce like an expert lawyer into the Cardano voting process, he knows nothing about Cardano or ADA, but he can help us introduce maybe like an open law DSL. So when you guys talk about having like arbitrary on the blockchain, like what OpenLaw does for Ethereum today and Claros and some of these other dApps, you can introduce something like that.
Just do you abbreviate DSL, please? Like, what is DSL?
Sure, it's a domain-specific language is what a DSL is. So Marlowe is a DSL on Cardano for financial contracts, and that's built on top of Cardano smart contracts. OpenLaw is a DSL on Ethereum, and it's for all legal contracts, legal wrappers. If you want to basically wrap a financial contract with some like legal terms and jargon around it that binds the both seller and buyer of that contract, you can do that using something like OpenLaw on Ethereum. We can build something like that on Cardano. We can incentivize a lawyer who has nothing to do with Cardano to come into Project Catalyst and help us form that proposal, and then we incentivize them with ADA. So I don't know. It doesn't
That's
have
a
to be
beautiful
tied.
idea.
Yeah, and that's just one concept.
Just to kind of like accentuate it, like, let's try imagine what the Cardano space looks like if we don't have that feature in a long time. Like, how does that look if Cardano goes global, and the majority of people who have the voting rights, like, you know, people who got in early, essentially. Like, I mean,
don't get me wrong. I'll shut up after this, I promise. Yeah. To Mercy's point, I actually really agree that you need some level of exclusivity to ADA as a token, because think about it. We're all VCs now. We're all just going to be voting on these massive funding rounds, yay or nay, based on do we think it's going to help our ADA number go up or not. At the end of the day, that's what voters are voting on. So Tashoma, to your point, if you don't introduce a system where you have, you know, expert attorneys, expert governance folks, expert app devs coming in and incentivizing them, you're going to have a system where, yeah, the folks who hold a lot of ADA definitely have the most to lose by voting on bad proposals. So you can say out of the right, they should have the most, you know, governance power because they have the most to lose and the most risk, I guess. But you don't really grow an ecosystem by just rewarding a bunch of whales who are in the ICO. Like, you know, it's just like, it's not a way to organically grow, I think. I'll shut up now.
So can I just inject, because I'm a little, I mean, I know I think I know where you're headed there, DC, and I love the idea of finding a way to incentivize folks who don't hold Cardano to be involved, or don't hold ADA to be involved in the Cardano ecosystem.
Experts.
But yes, experts. But where we started into this conversation was around the concept of voting and allowing people to but I mean, that's one person. So one person who's an expert, and they're going to vote with what weight?
Yeah, exactly. So this is where I honestly say, like, I don't have the implementation for how you put in a process like this in place.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It doesn't even have to be voting, by the way. It can just be on the implementation side. Like, you can have the Cardano community say, we want to implement this open law, but we have this expert attorney who maybe we incentivize them with, okay, you successfully implement this open law DSL, we'll give you 100K ADA, something like that. Right, so they don't actually vote on it. They're just a part of the implementation of the actual project.
Right.
We have a question in the chat about this idea. It says, if you introduce incentives like vote and earn, don't you think it will have a breach in the long run?
There's already vote and earn incentives. Think about it. We have a $250,000 fund, and 50K of it is already what?
So the question is vote and earn from zero, basically. Can you vote and earn if you don't hold anything in the first place, or participate and earn without holding anything in the first place?
Well, I guess that's why they put that 8,000 ADA cap on it. But let's say they didn't even have that. Let's say it was just one ADA you can vote. What? The barrier to entry is now 10 cents to voting. So I don't get that at all. I think that you already have earn to vote. You're already incentivizing voters. And by the way, guys, you have to incentivize voters because there's voting a tax.
Of course.
The way you incentivize stakers to provide security to the protocol, you have to incentivize voters, because you can, the same way you can have honest voting, you can have malicious voting attacks where you have vote buying and these things on chain. You already see it happening on EOS and some other blockchains. It's really bad and hard to get rid of. So you actually do need to find a way to pay voters. We're already doing it. So I think that soon when you minimize that 8,000 threshold to 1 ADA, then you're already going to have vote to earn already. So,
wait, so Joshua, how are you feeling, man? Like, do you even own ADA? And how do you feel in this conversation? We're talking about governance. Like, do you feel like your say should be heard? Like it has any weight here? Or... JC.
Yeah. I don't really think that people who don't hold ADA are part of the conversation at the moment. No.
So if you were looking to join the system, like, and you say you were an expert in another field, like, how would you want to be incentivized? Just,
I think it'll be through labor. So I'm not sure who brought up that point, if it was James or Steve, but I think it was through offering incentives for people providing their labor. That's the way that you'll get them involved.
one question that comes to mind is, how would we decide on that? How do we decide on choosing this person? You know, say there's, as Sydney was saying, like someone to do a law DSL, right? How do we decide who's the best person for that? Is it just one person, or do we get a couple of people with different opposing views on how it should be implemented, and then we vote on that implementation? Or is it a hackathon? Like, I don't know.
That's the question of it. Go ahead, Mercy.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is I think that what we have right now in Project Catalyst is a good starting point, right? Because people have taken a piece of the big vision, you know. People are dealing with micro lending, some people are dealing with education, you know, whatever it is. People are doing different things. So based on that, you know, there is some leadership at that level in terms of, okay, I feel like I have these skills and I feel like I can implement this project. So say I take the leadership on that, and then it is my responsibility to look for the appropriate skills, right? So whoever I can find, or whether it's through advertisements or through one-on-one or whatever it is, then, you know, they do the work, I pay them, now they have ADA, and hopefully they can become voters as well. So I think that it's a process, and it's baby steps, and we go along, you know, the process or the roadmap or whatever we want to call it.
So, I mean, we don't have a limit. Basically, all you've got to have is an email address to join, sign into IdeaScale and put forward a proposal. You don't have to own ADA to do that.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, pick the smartest lawyer on the planet and get him to sign into IdeaScale and put forward a proposal to build a DSL for the legal work that needs to be done. And he doesn't have to own anything, an email address.
To propose an
yeah,
idea,
to propose.
to comment. I've gotten some very specific comments from people who showed up and specifically said, hey, I'm outside the ecosystem. Just wanted to come comment.
Right. That's the beauty of it.
That's great. Yeah, I feel very strongly about you have to own ADA to vote, because that's how we find out if somebody's taking it seriously. And let's invite all the experts we want. Lawyers, marketers, politicians, everybody, bring them all in. But their way of saying, hey, I care about this enough to participate is by saying, and I'm gonna make sure I own that little bit of ADA that's required. For me, that's still the point. If I have to pull somebody along to get them in and they're not that interested, then that's fine. I don't want their expertise, right?
So we got like 20 minutes to get through audience questions. It's popping off in the chat room right now. So Izuchukwu says, one of the main disadvantages of decentralization is that decentralization most time brings up disagreement on people's ideological concepts.
That's true.
I think it's a good point.
I don't think
that's not a disadvantage.
I mean, that's not.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a disadvantage.
Yeah, it's like you agree to a contract with predefined terms, so it doesn't matter what your ideologies are. You're saying this is the contract, buyer and seller. We're putting this on the chain to enforce, right? So ideologies aside, right? Don't enter a contract that's against your ideology. It's I don't get how that's the whole point of blockchain, right? To allow you to respect your ideologies and only enter into contracts and services that respect those ideologies. I'm not like knocking that comment at all. I'm just saying, like, I think that's an advantage of blockchain, actually, not a disadvantage.
I mean, to speak on like disagreements, I mean, that's part of the reason why we have great ideas right now on IdeaScale, because, you know, it pushes you to actually, have a more consolidated idea, pushes you to do more research and come back with, a better proposal. So I think in a way, disagreements are actually good because it forces you to think if this is the best, possible, proposal you would like to put up and, do research.
The United States is failing right now because we forgot how to disagree, right? And the things we are choosing to disagree about are nonsense, right? Because we lost the ability to have disagreements that matter.
Disagreements that matters.
Right. Let's talk about the important stuff. It's good if we disagree. Let's hash that out until we come to consensus.
I like that.
Not agree. Yeah,
it's good to disagree. I like that mantra. I'm gonna take that on every day. It's good to disagree.
Come on, yeah.
I think Sydney is making a very important comment here about the flow of power, that through decentralization, it's actually easy for power to flow. And I think I totally agree with that. Because then the power is not contained, right, in a silo. We're decentralized, and it doesn't happen overnight, but gradually the power flows to the edges.
That's an Aziza comment.
I'm thinking, like, how does decentralization affect like a monarchy?
I was thinking about this earlier in this conversation, and I was thinking about it last night. One of the big advantages of decentralization is that leadership is exhausting, and in a decentralized system, you don't have to have the same leader all the time, right? Going back to the United States for just a second, part of the reason we have to vote between these two guys on Tuesday night is because more talented people are like, I don't want that job. Why would I want to take my life and do that? You kidding me? I don't want to do that, right? And so it's really hard work to lead. And for me, one of the ideals about decentralization is that you can be a leader, but then also get breaks from that, right? And in too many jobs, again, I'll go back to school because that's my experience. I never wanted to be a principal because being a principal is a seven days a week. You're on call. Something goes wrong with some kid's family on Saturday afternoon. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You got to go take care of that now. I don't want that responsibility. But if I could have it half the time, I would do that, right? Yeah. Just let me take a break from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in management, they call it firefighting, when you spend almost 80% of your time just dealing with problems that people don't feel like they're empowered to solve themselves.
Perfect. Great example.
So another thing is, if you introduce incentives like vote and earn, don't you think it will have a breach in the long run? Like when people don't get rewarded after voting?
So again, there's already vote and earn incentives. If you have ADA, you're earning by voting in Project Catalyst right now. So I just want to make that clear. I don't know if that was obvious or not.
Okay. And also, will the total supply of each token not run out via incentive giveaway? Let's say that the total supply of the token used for incentives is 500 million tokens. What if there is always 20 million votes times 10 in a year? How do you manage the token incentives and meeting up incentives of those who vote? And you also know voting is incremental and also can happen on different occasions and different places around the world. I think that was the end of. Oh no, it's a big question.
Steve, you got this.
You're going to need to break down several of those terms, I think, for the biggest.
Steve, this is all you.
It's me.
I think a summary basically of the question is, like we're giving out ADA here, right? But we have a finite amount of ADA. So my understanding is that, just dishing out ADA for everybody, for voting, for community advising, for all these projects, and we're going to run out of ADA. So that's my understanding.
This question is, oh, sorry, Mercy.
No, go ahead. You go ahead,
This
James.
question is such a perfect example of why we need experts, right? And there's a difference between experts and authority. And there's a lot of work that's been done to show how the Treasury is going to stay funded.
Right.
And IOHK has designed it in a way that everybody has to understand it's just the initial way that it's been designed, because somebody had to make these decisions. And as we all use the Treasury, we're all going to start to understand the parameters that are involved. And once a critical mass of people understand those parameters, then we can start voting on it. But there's a spreadsheet going around. Let's see if we can get a link to that. Maybe we can link to it in the show notes that shows how funds are going to be funded. And basically the big idea is that in this learning stage that we're all in, getting Cardano off the ground, there is a centralized pool of money coming from IOHK to fund this work. But eventually, once Cardano is used by everybody, transaction fees will continue to kind of fund these projects, hopefully indefinitely.
Right.
Yeah, the Treasury is a self-funding thing.
Right.
It's, you know, it builds, and the more use we have within the system,
Right.
the more transactions occur, the more fees go in, and the more money is there to move forward with the work that needs to be done. I mean, right now we're trying to bootstrap a whole bunch of development and bring developers and interested parties in to build those things that drive the transaction levels that we're looking for. So, I mean, that's, you know, we need use and utility. And if we can get use and utility, we'll have transactions. If we have transactions, then we're going to have funding in the Treasury to continue to self-sustain. So that's, you know, this is just the bootstrap phase right here.
Yeah, I think it's something like 5% of all transaction fees that are going into that Treasury. I don't know if that's the exact number, but it might be literally 5%, which is like when you're talking about a system that's generating more equivalent or more fees than Ethereum per day, which, you know, 2 years from now, that's what Cardano will be doing. Like, that's powerful in terms of a self-sustaining system, right? That communities can just vote on and say, hey, we want to fund 20% of this total fund just to African projects, because that's what's important to scaling Cardano right now. Like, let us vote on those things, let the Treasury fees handle the rest, and it really does become like this growing, you know, self-sustainable system.
So right now it's what, about 80 million a year that's going into the Treasury?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
And we've got really, I mean, DC, how are we doing transaction wise compared, you know, to what we're looking at a year from now, 2 years from now?
Right.
You've looked
Basically
at these
not.
numbers.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't even have smart contracts,
right?
We don't
Yeah.
have smart contracts, right? We don't have computation. Like, what's going to drive transaction fees hasn't even showed up to Cardano. We have metadata now, which is a great first step towards smart contracts. You know, we got multi-asset ledger, so tokens coming on this month. So there's, you know, in the background, multi-sig, there's things that are going to start driving transaction fees, but it's just not here yet. We just have to be patient. You know?
So, and on top of that, all of the parameters, like the 5% that you quoted, all of those parameters are adjustable. And guess who gets to decide? You know, it's not IOHK's making those decisions, you know, 2 years down the road. If we find out that 5% is just too much, in other words, we can't, you know, the Treasury is just getting too big and fat and it's laying around and it's just getting lazy, then, you know, we need to back that thing off a little bit and cut it down to, you know, 3%, 2.5%, whatever is going to assure sustainability over time, but not be onerous.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties into this other point that Zuchoko is making. He says they're in line with what you're saying about fees, but that means people are paying to vote. Because every transaction must attract a fee, you know, could you just clear the air?
This one is what I'm really excited about, and it's kind of connected to kind of the longer term thing. A few years down the road, we're going to be comparing ourselves to Visa and MasterCard, right? Forget Ethereum. And you're going to be able to tell people who are still onboarding to this, look, you could pay a certain transaction fee to Visa and MasterCard. And that's only when you're talking about financial transactions, buying stuff, right? But those transactions, they don't go to a centralized company. They go back to the community. And one of the places those transaction fees go is into this treasury of money that then funds new projects. So it's not voters who are paying in, it's just everybody who uses the thing. We're all going to be paying less to use it than we do for credit cards. And it goes back to us. So hopefully that sounds appealing. And if it doesn't sound appealing yet, we gotta work on the story to tell there.
Let me quickly just add to that. So so let's say, with the project catalyst that we have right now, we're going to vote maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. We don't know. But okay, so say if I want to vote for some projects, yes, it's going to incur transaction fees, but it's very, very small compared to the compensation that I'm going to get back for voting. So when okay, so I voted, I got 10 ADA, say, but then, I got 10 ADA as incentives or rewards. But then for every voting that I did, yes, it would attract transaction fees, but it's way less than the incentives or the rewards that I get as a voter.
So the
Hope
way
that clarifies it.
Yeah, and keep in mind that there might be, right now we've got 97 proposals that will be voted on. And when you go in and you put your votes on the ballot, you pay one transaction fee. So it doesn't matter how many things are being voted on. It's when you submit your ballot, your filled in ballot. So you drop it in the box, you pay that one fee. And it doesn't matter if there's 3 things you're voting on or 300 things you're voting on. So, I mean, that scale is incredible that we can do all of that and have a, what is it? A 0.17 ADA, something like that.
They say garbage in, garbage out, which I think means they got what you were saying. So we cleared up that point.
I thought they were talking about me. It's normally true.
So thinking about the next episode, because we're going to wrap up soon. Questions that pop to my head is Voltaire. I mean, when is that supposed to be implemented, right? It's like within the next 12 months, right? So,
I beg your pardon?
When is Voltaire, the actual governance protocol, like when is that actually going to be implemented? Like we haven't.
Well, this is the beginning of it.
Right.
Okay.
This is, see, the thing about this is it's not, you don't flip a switch.
Yes, that's another definition. That's another way to talk about what decentralization is, right? When you're centralized, the centralized authority flips the switch. Decentralization is always kind of slow, and you got to make sure it's working each step of the way.
What do they call it? A hockey stick, right?
Right, and that's what we're going to see, hopefully.
Yeah.
And there might be some blips.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think to Shoshoma's point, though, you're talking about when you'll be able to just use Cardano as like a governance as a service blockchain. And Charles talked about this a lot. That's probably, in my opinion, like just honest estimate, I would say like mid 2020, if we're lucky, early, Q2.
2021, you mean?
My bad, 2021. So I think that's a couple months, out, because you got to talk about opening up all of these aspects of voting on Cardano, opening up Prism so everyone can use it to form the base of identity in their dApps. Like there's different things that got to come with that, and they have to fully roll out Voltaire. But I would say Project Catalyst, like especially when we get that first vote in, to me that's the start of Voltaire.
You bet.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you guys think it's worth doing an entire episode, just kind of getting in deep into Voltaire and how this system might apply to other industries, or the changes it might bring about in society? Like, how do you feel about that?
I think so. I mean, it's already the largest DAO, pretty much, like out there. When you look at like the raw numbers on what's on Ethereum and everywhere else, like Project Catalyst and like Voltaire, this is already the largest DAO out there. And fund-wise too, we're competing with like the top VCs out there in terms of, you said it, Steve, 80 million assets under management per year. Like that's absurd. So we can, I think it's worth dedicating a whole episode to talking about.
Just explain again, what is a DAO?
Oh yeah, sorry. Mercy, did you want to say it?
Oh, no, sorry. I was looking at the chat and
Okay.
Go ahead, DAO. Yeah, no.
It's okay. It's decentralized autonomous organization. So think of it as many different ways. You could have a corporate DAO structure, like an LLC on a blockchain, basically. We plan to implement something like this on Liquid, but Mercy is working on more like a non-government NGO organization. She can have like a hybrid DAO NGO on the blockchain as well. So there's many different structures you can have around a DAO, but the concept is groups of people are coming together and they're basically organized around some amount of funds that they can deploy for a combined effort, whatever that project may be. So that's like what a DAO is.
Amazing.
And a lot of that, I believe, is via smart contracts. So, a lot of stuff go onto the blockchain, like we try to minimize the human part of it to the basic essential, unless it's absolutely necessary for humans to make decisions, kind of thing.
100%.
Yeah, I feel like decentralization cannot really change the way people live until you introduce government on it. So for if you feel like decentralization is the way the world should go, maybe for Africa or third world countries, then you need to actually, and that's why I like Cardano, because right now you can actually vote in a decentralized way. So to your point, Tashoma, yes, we need to dedicate like a whole episode talking about voting and governance on the blockchain.
And I just want to clear it and say, it's not just voting for Cardano stuff. Like we can implement a voting system in Ethiopia. We can implement one in Philadelphia, right? Anywhere around the world that needs a voting system, which is pretty much everywhere, you can use the basics of Cardano to implement that. So I think that's what's really cool actually about it.
I mean, all right, come on guys, you guys are talking crazy here. How do you implement government without getting the government's authority?
Yeah. You do deals. You do private public partnerships, and you implement Atala Prism. Because once you implement Atala Prism, realize it's like this nice thing that governments see as a streamlined way to do KYC and AML. And on the other hand, it's the gateway into Cardano's like decentralized, application universe. So
maybe going into what Atala Prism is a good idea.
Okay, that's a great idea. Atala Prism is what we call a decentralized identifier. So that means that think of it as like a passport on chain, a digital version of your passport. It attests to your government valid issued ID, whether it's your driver's license, your actual passport, your social security number. It can link into your social accounts, so your LinkedIn and your Facebook. And it's just like a wallet app that you have on your phone. I actually have it on my mobile app. And you can use ZK proofs and all these privacy preserving techniques to basically be able to attest to owning certain pieces of data. Like right now they have a pilot in the University of Georgia. So all the country of Georgia, every university, when you get a certificate, a graduate degree, you actually get an Atala Prism profile that's linked to that diploma. And then you can attest to that, anywhere else that basically accepts Atala Prism. There definitely is a way you need to implement Atala Prism and needs to be open source, but that's coming really soon.
So you're saying Atala Prism is going to replace our passport? Yeah, 5 years from now.
It's our passport on chain. It's our digital version. It's the equivalent of it, I think.
Oh, wow. Well, let's leave that for the viewers to chew on. Join us again next week every Sunday for the next 6 months at 2 p.m. EST. Check out our website, www.afrofinlab.com. Subscribe with us, like our videos, share our videos, spread the message of decentralization, and also join us in the live chat so you can get your questions asked directly. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Yeah, nice. Thanks for having me on today. And see you again.
Yo, and also thanks for Steven for coming on and clarifying all the questions we had regarding IdeaCatalyst. You did a great job, man.
Thanks for having me.
That was great.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care.